So it's been a while since I've done an episode of the Tour of Remembrance, but I'm here once again in North Wales and we're exploring a local churchyard here, one that's kind of special to me, again linked to my own history. And there's some really amazing stories that I found, one from the end of the war and one from the beginning of the war, and they are absolutely amazing. So stay tuned and let's explore Abergele together. So yes, welcome back to another episode of the Tour of Remembrance series. Today we're in the village of Abergele, and Abergele is a town in the county borough of Conwy here in North Wales, and here is the War Memorial, and it is located in the grounds of St Michael's Parish Church, which is quite nice because the name of my high school was St Michael's, so that's a nice little touch. The War Memorial itself is of limestone construction with the Celtic cross on the very top there, with Celtic knotwork as well, and obviously, as normal, it commemorates both the World Wars, First World War and Second World War. And in terms of its dedication, I couldn't find anything about the story like I have done in other episodes, but it was dedicated on the 7th of July 1921. So as you can tell there, that little line is obviously saying about the First World War. And a fun fact, the reason it says 1914 to 1919 is actually to do with a lot of bureaucracy in this country. Unfortunately, I learned the other week that even though the war officially ended 11th of November 1918, they needed a further date in the future because they knew they were going to need to identify people. So that's why it kind of extends to 1919 with the First World War, and I believe 1947 or 46 with the Second World War as well. Just noticed on the bottom of the War Memorial as well, there's a Welsh phrase there. Now I will have to translate that at a later date, but hopefully that will, by the power of editing, appear on screen now. I don't think I've come across this on other War Memorials. I have come across Welsh phrases on one in Davies, but not sure if this is the same one. So there on the bottom of the War Memorial you can see some of the names of the people from Abergele that lost their lives in the Second World War, and on the other side is where two names of two amazing stories I came across, so let's explore those now. So here is the other side of the War Memorial, and the two names that we're going to be looking at is Trevor G. Davies and Gwilym Jones as well, so let's dive into their story. They are amazing. So yeah, the first name that I dived into, which was amazing, I saw the date, that what really piqued my interest. So Private Trevor Gwyn Davies, he was born here in Abergele, and he served with the Royal Scots, the 8th Battalion in particular. And the day that he died was the 26th of March 1945, aged 21, and that date really piqued my interest. I was thinking, end of the war, what happened during the end of the war? Well, there was fierce fighting towards the end of the war. He was commemorated here on obviously his local war memorial, but he's actually buried in the Reichswald Forest War Cemetery, Nordheim, Westphalen, Germany. Now, as soon as I said those words, Reichswald Forest, some people may know what battle he was involved in, and that's what piqued my interest. I saw the date, I saw where he was actually buried, and that piqued my interest, and I immediately wanted to research and learn more about him. So, in actual fact, Private Trevor Gwyn Davies, he was involved in Operation Veritable, which was the push across the Rhine River and into Germany. So this is right at the end of the war. The Allies are trying to push on. It is fierce fighting, and sometimes it's an often overlooked part of the war. We think of D-Day. A lot of people think of D-Day. We roll through France, Belgium, and into Germany, and the war's over, and that's it. That's 100% not true, as shown by this quote. So, the bloody fight for the Reichswald, according to Lieutenant General Horrocks, was fought by the regimental officers and men under the most ghastly conditions imaginable. Now, obviously I can't go into loads of detail. I don't know everything about Operation Veritable and Operation Varsity as well, which was the airborne element of this operation. But I'd highly recommend my good friend Geraint Jones's book, Voices of Victory, and he's also did a live stream recently with World War II TV, which I'll link below. Go check it out. He dives into this topic and it's amazing. Basically, this battle would comprise of British, and Canadian Land Forces. So you've got the 53rd Welsh Infantry Division and the 43rd Wessex Infantry Division as well, and the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division as well. And that's just to name 3. There's so many more that were involved in this. It was a massive operation. And like I said before, there was also an airborne element. There was also the British 6th Airborne Division as well in this massive battle towards the end of the war. So during my research, I found out a little bit more about Private Trevor Gwyn Davies and what he was doing with the Royal Scots 8th Battalion. So, and this was from the direct war diary of the Royal Scots, which was 8th Battalion as well, which was amazing. I love diving into the detail. So, on the 26th of March, the 8th Battalion Royal Scots were in the region of Gossenhof. So this is the kind of the region that we're dealing with. So it's near the Reichswald Forest. They're still trying to push through. And this is, what I'm about to read is word for word from the unit war diary. So bear with me. So, during the morning, orders were received for the battalion to expand the area to the northwest. And at 1500 hours, the commanding officer held an O group at D Company location and issued orders for the advance onto the limited objectives of 1900 hours to be carried out. So I read that as clear they were in one position and then they were told we've got to advance more, we've got to expand our area of influence basically and make sure the enemy has been eradicated from this area. So they've been holding a position and basically been told to move out. And this is March as well, by the way, so 1900 hours is going to be either getting dark or it's going to be dark already at this point. So then the war diaries continues. B and D Company move forward and occupy their objectives. B Company encountering negligible opposition, but D Company having considerable trouble with Spandau fire from neighbouring farms. Spandau fire is referring to machine gun fire, so MG34s, MG42s. It's just a slang term for machine guns that was used during the war. The situation being made more difficult for them due to their objective having been set ablaze by our TK fire and illuminating the company in the area. So I read that as their objective was set on fire by the artillery fire that had already come from the Allies, and that made it difficult because, like I said, it's night at this point. It's illuminating the company that are trying to advance, so not the best. So they're already under fire. You can already see there's going to be some difficulties advancing. So that's B and D companies, but A Company. So A Company moved forward for commencement of phase 2 of the operation. Considerable opposition was encountered by the company on the way to their objective, which was however reached successfully when the company had to withstand enemy counterattacks and heavy crossfire from Spandaus. Now, this just shows the duality of the war. You've got some troops who have it maybe easier than others, and others in the same area who have it way more difficult. So, and I think this war diary shows how difficult the fighting was in this region, and they're not trying to gain massive ground. They're only trying to gain a couple hundred meters, if that. They're just trying to expand, the region that they've already, occupied. So yes, they've had heavy crossfire on Spandaus, which continued for some considerable time. Despite the enemy infiltration into their position and ammunition supplies running short, the company held firm and the enemy attacks died down. So again, it's that stoicism, isn't it? Ammo's running short, we're under Spandau fire, but we've got to get this done. We've got to get this objective. Now, obviously, I don't know which company he was in. I couldn't find that much detail, but I am 99% sure he was in this movement on this date, considering his date of death was 26th of March, so he was probably involved in this fighting. And I just thought it was amazing. You wouldn't think this just goes to show, this is one of those stories that shows the reach of the war. I know thousands of men, hundreds of thousands of men were involved in the war, but I would have never ever guessed that someone from this battle would be buried in a very, very small town here in North Wales. Like I said before, it just shows you the reach of the war and how far it affected people and people's lives. So the other name that I wanted to talk about today was Gwilym Jones, and he was the son of Mr. and Mrs. Owen Jones of 8 New Street, Abergele. And during the war, he served on HMS Hood as an able seaman. Now, that name, HMS Hood, is synonymous with the Royal Navy in the Second World War. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, no way, this is crazy. That I've come across such an amazing story so close to home. So, Gwilym Jones died on the 24th of May, 1941, aged 21, and he's commemorated here, obviously in his local war memorial, and on the Portsmouth Naval Memorial, which if you haven't seen, is absolutely massive. I've not been there myself, but I know of it and I've seen pictures. It is amazing to see. It commemorates all the seamen that were lost at sea, that couldn't be found, their bodies couldn't be found, but they wanted to have a place to remember them by, and that's what they chose. So why is HMS Hood so important, and why is it an amazing story, and why did I get so excited? I got excited because HMS Hood was a battle cruiser, and actually the largest one in the world at the time, and it was seen as the peak of the Royal Navy. It was kind of like the flagship, think of HMS Victory, back in the day. This is kind of the similar reverence that the HMS Hood was held in. During the Second World War, at this time, in 1941, it was commanded by Vice Admiral Lancelot E. Holland. Unfortunately, no relation to the amazing historian James Holland, but an amazing name nonetheless. And yes, like I said before, seen as this symbol of the might of the Royal Navy and its power. So, leading up to the end of May, on May the 2nd, Hood and the Prince of Wales were ordered to intercept 2 German warships, the Bismarck and the Prinz Eugen, 300 miles off the coast of Iceland. Now again, Bismarck might ring a bell. That was kind of like the Germans' equivalent of the Hood. It was their absolutely massive battleship, and the Allies knew if that got into the Atlantic Ocean, it would wreak havoc, and it would just spell disaster for us and our preparations for the rest of the war, really. So, during the month of May, they're trying to locate the Bismarck, the Hood and the Prince of Wales, and other naval craft are trying to find it. And actually, it was on the 24th of May that it finally came to a crescendo. And unfortunately, during the battle between the Hood and the Bismarck, the Hood was first hit by Prinz Eugen and then the Bismarck. And at 6:01 a.m, the hit from the Bismarck pierced the armour of the Hood, causing it to explode. And the belief behind this was that this shot from the Bismarck hit the internal ammunition store in HMS Hood, roughly carrying 100 tons of explosives at this time, therefore destroying the Hood from the inside out. And the Hood sank in 3 minutes, and only 3 sailors managed to escape out of a crew of roughly 1,400 sailors. And obviously Gwilym Jones was unfortunately one of the people, one of the men that lost their lives during this naval battle. And again, that's seen as one of the most climactic, not even necessarily naval battles, one of the most climactic battles of the Second World War, and one of the most important, because then the hunt to hunt down the Bismarck after this as well, to kind of get revenge for the Hood, was another big thing. It was big for the Navy, it was big for the country, it was big for morale as well, losing our flagship. So there we have it, another amazing stories found here in North Wales. I hope you enjoyed that latest episode here on the Echoes from the Past YouTube channel and the Tour of Remembrance series. If you did enjoy, maybe like it and subscribe so you don't miss out on more. There's plenty more war memorials and amazing stories for me to find like this. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to check out my last video where I explored the history of the 2-seat variant of the Spitfire, you can check that out here, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.